In 1973, a team of skilled divers set out to break records in one of Australia's most dangerous underwater caves, the Shaft. What began as a thrilling challenge in the sapphire depths of Mount Gambier soon spiraled into a desperate fight for survival, leaving a legacy of tragedy and unanswered questions beneath the silent waters. In 1938, on a quiet dairy farm near Mount Gambier, South Australia, a discovery was made that would ultimately transform a small paddock into one of the most fascinating yet haunting cave diving sites. Known simply as the Shaft, this underwater cave system emerged almost by accident, an unsuspecting part of a daily routine turned extraordinary. It all started when a farmer, going about his business on Thompson's Paddock, a modest 5-acre farm, heard the sudden commotion of his horse stumbling. As he approached, he found the animal's hoof caught in what looked like a small, foot-wide hole in the ground. At first glance, the hole didn't appear to be too deep, maybe 20 feet down to a still water surface. But something about it unsettled the farmer, who decided to investigate further. To close off this unexpected opening, the farmer began tossing rocks into the hole. He gathered stones from around the paddock and dropped them in, one after another, until he had thrown in hundreds, even thousands of stones. Yet they simply vanished into the darkness below, swallowed up without a sound, without a trace. It was as though the ground itself had opened up into a vast, unseen world, and no matter how much he threw in, it wasn't enough to fill it. Intrigued by this bottomless pit, the farmer eventually widened the hole, expanding it to a width of about 3 feet. This allowed for further exploration, and soon enough, divers and caving enthusiasts caught word of the strange sight hidden away on the dairy farm. What lay beneath that small opening was unlike anything they had ever imagined. The shaft's main chamber stretched over 460 feet long and 260 feet wide, an enormous cavern hidden entirely below ground. Like an ancient cathedral forgotten by time, it was a space of eerie silence and otherworldly beauty. But that beauty concealed a sense of danger, an unforgiving place where air and sunlight seemed reluctant to enter. The crystal clear water filled the chamber with a surreal sapphire blue light, especially around noon when sunlight sliced through the narrow opening above, casting beams that reached down to its depths, illuminating the chamber in an unearthly glow. From the main chamber, 2 tunnels descended deep into the darkness in opposite directions. The northwest tunnel dropped to a depth of 260 feet, while a second tunnel stretched further, reaching 407 feet below the surface. As divers explored, they found the enormous pile of rocks the farmer had once thrown into the hole, resting at 118 feet down, a silent testament to that first encounter decades earlier. What added even more intrigue was the possibility that the shaft was part of a larger, hidden network. Some believed it connected to freshwater systems reaching toward the southern shores of Australia, perhaps draining into distant, unexplored caverns. For many, this theory was enough to stoke curiosity and excitement, an open invitation to uncover what lay beyond the shaft's foreboding depths. Yet with this wonder came a danger few understood. For divers, the allure of the shaft was irresistible, a gateway into the mysteries of Mount Gambier's underground labyrinth. But as we'll soon see, this cavern's depths would demand a heavy toll. In the winter of 1973, a group of divers embarked on a journey that would take them further into the shaft than anyone had gone before. It was an expedition filled with hope and excitement, but as they descended into the unforgiving darkness, they had no way of knowing the tragedy that awaited them. On May 27, 1973, 9 experienced dive instructors gathered at the shaft, prepared to make history in what would be one of the most ambitious dives ever attempted in the Mount Gambier region. Their goal was simple, yet daring: to reach the perimeter, a known depth of 250 feet, marking a record attempt that would push them further into the shaft's depths than anyone had dared to go before. They had planned meticulously, preparing their equipment and positioning a shot line to guide their descent, but nothing could prepare them for the series of fatal events that would unfold the following day. On May 28th, with anticipation high, the team began their final descent around noon. The 8 divers, including Robert, John, Peter, Gordon, Larry, and siblings Glenn, Stephen, and Christine, moved systematically, One member of their team stayed behind on the surface to manage equipment and assist if any issues arose. Due to the narrow 3-foot opening, each diver had to be lowered one by one using a tripod hoist system, followed by their gear. The equipment setup alone took time and precision, a small taste of the challenges that lay ahead. Once submerged, the group followed the shot line, descending with determination. As they reached deeper levels, the environment grew increasingly alien. A surreal combination of dark, crystalline water and eerie silence, pierced only by the sounds of their own breathing. They were surrounded by the cavern's steep walls and felt the immense weight of the water pressing down on them. For a while, everything was going as planned, but around 180 feet, Robert began to feel the effects of nitrogen narcosis, a disorienting condition that can make even the most experienced divers feel confused or euphoric. Nitrogen narcosis, often called the rapture of the deep, clouds judgment and slows reflexes, making it difficult to remain in control. Compounding this, a sudden shift in the weather cast thick clouds over the sky, drastically reducing the light filtering through the entrance of the shaft. The once crystal waters turned dark, and the beam of light that guided them was now gone, leaving them with flashlights that barely cut through the thickening gloom. To make matters worse, the movement of so many divers stirred up silt from the cave floor, creating a murky, suffocating cloud that seemed to swallow everything. With the visibility near zero, panic began to ripple through the group. Disoriented and unable to see one another, the divers lost their sense of direction, drifting apart into different sections of the cave. In their confusion, Glenn, Robert, Larry, and Peter managed to retrace their steps and ascend, barely clinging to the remaining air supplies. Each was on the brink of exhaustion, gasping for breath as they broke the surface, struggling to make sense of what had just occurred. Glenn, feeling an overwhelming sense of dread, immediately volunteered to go back down, hoping against hope that he could save his friends. Taking in as much air as he could, he dove once more into the darkened depths, determined to find Stefan, Christine, and the others. At around 225 feet, Glenn's light illuminated a haunting sight. Stefan's flashlight and camera lay abandoned, markers of his brother's presence. But of Stefan himself, there was no trace. After the tragedy of that fatal May dive, recovery operations at the shaft became a complex and challenging effort. Initial attempts were made by police divers, who managed to descend to about 200 feet, but despite their best efforts, were unable to locate the bodies of the missing divers. The narrow entrance, coupled with the cave's intricate structure and silt-filled waters, made the search nearly impossible under the current conditions. Recognizing the dangers and limitations of their equipment and training, the authorities made the difficult decision to temporarily suspend the search, hoping that with further training and assistance from the Navy, a more effective recovery would be possible. Months passed, leaving the families and friends of the lost divers with little closure. Then, in an unexpected turn of events, a film crew capturing footage at the shaft in January of 1974 accidentally discovered Stefan's body, lodged at a depth of only 50 feet. It was a haunting reminder of how close to the surface he was, and yet how unreachable he had been at the time of the accident. This discovery reignited the search efforts and renewed the resolve of those determined to bring the remaining divers home. On March 9, 1974, nearly a year after the initial tragedy, a specialized dive team with extensive expertise in deep, technical dives returned to the shaft. Using advanced diving techniques, they were able to navigate the cave's difficult conditions and at last make progress in their recovery. At a depth of 185 feet, they found Christine and Gordon, bringing a small measure of closure to their grieving families. As they pressed further, they located John's body at around 205 feet, lying silent in the still waters of the shaft. The final recovery was completed in April of 1974, marking the end of the most harrowing cave diving recoveries in Australia's history. The shaft, once a beacon for adventure, had become a solemn reminder of nature's silent and unpredictable power. And while the divers had been recovered, the story of the shaft and the courage of those who dared to enter its depths would live on. A tale not just of exploration, but of the tragic limits that lie beyond.